It is, as I mentioned at the top of the show, of Srećko Horvat, who is part putting together the Belmarsh Tribunal, which kicks off on Friday in New York City. It's basically, an attempt by many thinkers, activists, and political figures, including a friend of the show, Stephen Donziger, who will essentially sent to hold to account and put on trial, it's sort of a people's tribunal, all of the war criminals responsible for Guantanamo Bay, the war in Iraq, the ongoing imprisonment of Julian Assange and other whistleblowers like him. It was an interesting interview, and I think an important cause. So yeah, let's move into that. Srećko Horvat of the Progressive International and the Belmarsh Tribunal. So let's go there. Joining me today is philosopher and member of the Progressive International, Srećko Horvat, who is here to talk about the Belmarsh Tribunal. Srećko, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, I guess could you just introduce the Belmarsh Tribunal and when it's happening and what it's all about?
Yeah, I mean, maybe we could perhaps start from the very name, Belmarsh Tribunal. What the fuck does it mean? What is Belmarsh? I think Guantanamo, of course, or Abu Ghraib are much more famous or infamous, to be more precise, all across the world. But Belmarsh is a prison in the United Kingdom, in southeast London. And it's a prison which is being called the British Guantanamo, namely because of its severe conditions and also because some of the detainees are there for an indefinite period of time after the 9/11 anti-terror laws. But it's also at the same time the prison where the WikiLeaks publisher Julian Assange is being held. So we decided 2 years ago at the Progressive International to found a people's tribunal, which would take the name of the prison where Julian Assange is being held, in order to turn the tables, to put the mirror to the real criminals, to the real war criminals, and to speak and to examine the war crimes which were revealed by Julian Assange, namely the war crimes in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Guantanamo, and in many, many other places. So on the 25th of February, on Friday, we are coming to New York City, where we're having a new session of the Belmarsh Tribunal. We will be joined by former Guantanamo detainees, for instance, Mohamedou al-Slahi. Perhaps he might be now more famous because of the movie Mauritanian, with Jodie Foster, which is about him and Nancy Hollander, the courageous lawyer who defended him, who will also be in New York. Stephen Donziger, Roger Waters, Yanis Varoufakis, Cornel West, many, many, many other people.
And this was sort of inspired by a tribunal that was originally convened during the Vietnam War by Bertrand Russell and Jean-Paul Sartre.
Precisely. So we and also many other tribunals all across the world were inspired by this courageous tribunal founded by two philosophers, one from Britain and the other one from France, as you said, Russell and Sartre, which was founded in 1966 with an attempt to put the United States government on trial because of the war crimes in Vietnam. And it included very famous, important people of the 20th century. Besides Sartre and Russell, it was Simone de Beauvoir, Tariq Ali, Isaac Deutscher, Vladimir Dedijer from Yugoslavia, Peter Weiss from Germany, many others. They had a few sessions. The first one was in Stockholm in 1967. The second one was in Copenhagen or near Copenhagen the year after. And it was under a lot of pressure, actually, we have to say, from the secret intelligence of the United States, like CIA or RAND Corporation. They were like regularly following what the members of the Russell Tribunal were doing. At one moment, there was even a geopolitical scandal, diplomatic scandal, because the co-chair of the Russell Tribunal, Vladimir Dedijer, wasn't admitted to France. At that time, which was very, very interesting because de Gaulle at that time was actually against the war in Vietnam. So after that, they tried to do their tribunal in Britain, where the Labour government blocked it. And in the end, they did it in Sweden. So this is the legacy of the Russell Sartre Tribunal. And I think 50 years later, today, what we have to do is to speak about the crimes of the early 20th century. It's very interesting. Recently, there was a recent report published on the price of the global war on terror, which was, initiated by George W. Bush after 9/11 in 2001. And the price, according to this report, of the war on terror is 38 million displaced people. 38 million displaced people, which is the biggest number since the Second World War of displaced people in the world. And all these people are displaced because the United States government had its fingers in 8 different countries: in Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan, Yemen, Somalia, the Philippines, Libya, and Syria. And no one has ended up in prison because of this crime. No one has ended up in prison because of the torture in Abu Ghraib, in Guantanamo. No one has ended up in prison because of the WikiLeaks revelations about the crimes which were committed. And this is the main idea of the tribunal, which will happen in New York City.
Yeah, I mean, this to me seems to be the central question here is that what do we do as citizens of, I guess, like nominally democratic countries? I mean, what do we do with a situation in which the United States and the governments of the United States and Great Britain have more or less openly committed war crimes for decades now, and certainly before that. But you're talking about indefinite detention, torture, murder, wars of aggression, and then like the reality is the only people, as you mentioned, who have been sent to jail over these crimes are people who blew the whistle, like Julian Assange, like Chelsea Manning, and others, like the Mauritanian who was just caught up in this dragnet post war on terror. So like obviously we can't rely on the government itself or the media because they're complicit as well. So I mean, like what are some of like the charges that are going to be presented here?
Yeah, I mean that's a very good question, and exactly, unfortunately, as you said, those who are in prison or who disappeared or who are being slowly killed are precisely the whistleblowers, are precisely the truth tellers, from Julian Assange, Chelsea Manning, Daniel Hale, Stephen Donziger. I mean, the list is pretty long. But what you have in the United States, and that's one of the reasons why the Progressive International is coming to the United States, is a sort of cynicism. How often has the liberal United States media spoken about Navalny, for instance? How often can you
Right.
these days, for instance, hear about the impending invasion of Russia into Ukraine? It's tomorrow. No, no, no. It's at 2 p.m. next day. No, it's at midnight. Constantly they're speaking about the invasion. But come on, shouldn't we speak about the invasion of the United States into Afghanistan, Iran, if you go back into history, which actually, also in Afghanistan previously? It's very interesting that the Mauritanian, whom you mentioned, Mohammed Ould Slahi, was actually fighting on the side of the United States, against the Soviets. And so they imprisoned this guy later, and they put him through torture, which was, of course, approved by Donald Rumsfeld, which is, waterboarding, sleep deprivation, isolation. He stays in Guantanamo for 15 years without charges. Julian Assange is already free for 3 years in the British Guantanamo without charges. He has been for 6-7 years at the Ecuadorian embassy because he has revealed these crimes. So your question, what can the public do? What can we do? Is a pertinent question. And what we are trying to do is to shed light on actually what those individuals, but also people who are in a way united or getting united, what these people actually revealed. And I think that's very important. Of course, we don't think that we have the capacity to sentence the accused, and that's not our ambition. That also wasn't the ambition of the Russell Sartre Tribunal to sentence the accused. What we want to do is actually to create a sort of tribunal which can shed light on the crimes, which can provoke a public debate, which can provoke political pressure, not just in the United States but across the world. Because I think, as the Rand Corporation said in some of their leaked documents, which were recently declassified, they said that the Russell Sartre Tribunal was an embarrassment for the United States because it showed what kind of crimes the United States committed. And in that way, I also think the Belmarsh Tribunal is a sort of embarrassment for the United States. But that's just the first step. What we hope to provoke is a bigger coalition, is a bigger pressure of people and movements who are not just from the United States, but from all across the world.
I want to return again to the title of the tribunal, named after Belmarsh Prison, which, as you described it, is probably the most notorious prison in the UK. You've described it as Britain's Guantanamo. It is currently where Julian Assange is being held, awaiting extradition to the United States. Um, what are the charges and like sort of arguments advanced by the British state to justify imprisoning him? And what is the reason the United States is demanding that he be extradited and charged under like the Espionage Act?
Yeah, I mean, it also shows a scandal in the legal system, but also politics of the United Kingdom, because it's not just the United States; it's United Kingdom, it's Australia, it was Ecuador, and it's of course then the United States, which were complicit in silencing and isolating Julian Assange. What was recently revealed was that the CIA had secret plans to kidnap him from the Ecuadorian embassy at the time when he was still there, also to murder him there. And the United Kingdom, on the basis of Julian Assange skipping bail in 2012, skipping bail, because he was at house arrest at that time for the very same reasons as he is in prison today. Trying to escape the extradition to the United States, because that actually means a death sentence for him. And he skipped bail, and that's basically the legal reason, the legal basis why the United Kingdom is keeping him at the British Guantanamo. At the same time, the United States wants him for the United States government, of course. It's not the American people who want him in a high security prison, it's the United States government. Wants Assange in a high security prison, Supermax prison, for violating the Espionage Act, which is also completely ridiculous. Because first of all, he's an Australian citizen. Second, he wasn't a whistleblower; he's a publisher, so he leaked material which was provided to him, and the things which he provided to the public is something which is so valuable, especially for the citizens of the United States, because it shows how the United States government violated the law. And if the United States government can violate the law like that, or if they can put Julian Assange in prison and then extradite him to the United States, then no journalist is safe, no dissident is safe, no one who criticizes the capitalist system. Take Stephen Donziger, that's another recent case where you can see that someone who is fighting against Chevron, destroying the Amazon, also faces persecution, isolation, and silence.
Um, I mean, like this issue about Assange being a publisher, I think is very critical because, I mean, like for instance, like what arguments would say like the New York Times make as to why what they do as a function of their as an institutional purpose is fundamentally different from what Julian Assange did and is being charged with espionage for. And like speaking more broadly, I mean, like you talked about a little bit, like what are the implications for if Assange were able to be convicted under the Espionage Act for doing espionage against the United States of America, a country he's not even a citizen of?
Yeah, I mean the effects of this legal precedent, but also political. It's a political case. Would be that any journalist of the New York Times, of Washington Post, but also a podcaster, could end up in prison, and not just podcasters or journalists from American soil, but from wherever, from France, from Spain, from Latin America, from Africa, from Asia, they could face the same fate as Julian Assange. And of course, Julian is not the first one. I mean, we've seen what happened to Edward Snowden, who, of course, wasn't a publisher in the sense of Julian Assange. He was a whistleblower. But it's also a case where you have someone actually contributing to democracy, contributing to the citizens knowing what kinds of crimes are going on, not only against other countries, but against the citizens themselves. Just remember what kind of surveillance programs Edward Snowden revealed, or also WikiLeaks in the Vault 7 leaks, which was about the CIA surveillance program.